I'm ready when you're ready.
Let's get started then. Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. This is a session on land banks and how we can use land banks to develop housing. So with us today, we have Jeff Hawkins, who's an environmental consultant out of Kalamazoo. He's worked with the Brownfield Authority since 2008. I don't think it was. And we've kept him around. So he's very familiar with Leelanau County and projects here. And Jim Tischler is, let me get the title right here, Development Director for the Michigan Land Bank Fast Track Authority. And we are very pleased to have Jim with us here today. He's also going to be speaking with us afterwards, I should say with a small group of us afterwards on a specific project. So not only is he graced us with his time for the presentation, but is also trying to help us with another project here in the county. So with that, we're going to get started. We have coffee coming. This is regular coffee out here. I'll have some decaf in a few minutes, and I'm going to jump next door just to make sure that everything's working. We are taping this, so make sure you sit where you can see the screen. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Trudy. Good morning to y'all. Happy Friday.
Good morning.
It's so good to be up here. Back in the middle of July, like a lot of governmental agencies, we were kind of stuck in traction during a good chunk of the pandemic, but we, as the land bankers downstate for the state land bank, this is our pride and joy. We love to get out and talk with local representatives, local communities in their places, because that's where the work has to happen. That doesn't happen in Lansing, it happens here. So the pandemic was a little frustrating for us because we were under this executive directive of the governor, couldn't travel, all good stuff. Well, that all released up on July 12th. So you are all the beneficiaries of the first real multi-meeting out-state county trip that my boss, Emily Dorr, the executive director, and I have been taking this week. Okay? We had a couple meetings last week, but they were kind of like local to Lansing. Here we are now. And so you cannot imagine how glad I am to be out in the field working with communities in such a wonderful place on such a wonderful Friday. So when I come back, you have to promise it'll be wonderful weather, wonderful place. Is that good? Yeah, you gotta shake your head yes or no. Okay, fine. Most people are shaking their heads yes. Okay, very good. So a little more background for you. Before things kind of went sideways with the pandemic, we were here, not in this room, but we were downstairs. Jeff and I and Trudy set this up, and we started to have a conversation with you as local officials and you as community representatives here in Leelanau County about this idea. So for those of you who were here back, when was that? 19 months ago, 20 months ago, you're going to see a little bit of repeat. For the rest of you who weren't there, if something is a little kind of, if I get in the weeds a little bit, you are granted license to tell me, Jim, stop, tell me what you mean, back up, okay? But no one's allowed to throw tomatoes today, okay? My goal today is to try to, as I talk to Trudy and John Gallagher, you're the land bank, the treasurer land bank chair, is to talk with you all today about how you might restart this conversation that got started back 18, 20 months ago, about using these tools, which can be direct. There are not a lot of communities and counties using these tools because they don't understand it quite yet. That's why we've been doing a lot of work in the field to help. The tools you're going to hear today have been on the books for actually more than 15 years, believe it or not. They just have not been used. They've not been used in this way to solve a problem, which I know from my last time here and talking to Trudy and John and Jeff as well. And you guys know you have this issue in your market, which is attainable, affordable housing. I don't think I need to tell you any of the details about that because you have that experience, but I want to show you just a couple of graphics that I found. You can flip the slide, wherever one is, the slide. And this is a click slide, so hold on to that for a minute. I found this week. Now look at this for the lines. This is a graph that's showing house prices in yellow or orange. Okay, the median home price. This is national data, by the way. Okay, not local, national data. And what's in green is AMI, average median income, okay? So you can see this trend line, which you know for sure is happening in your county, okay? And by the way, in just about every other county in the state, isn't this happening? You guys were just out front, ahead of us, seeing this early on, right? So this graph is intended to show you that the fact now is that where once household incomes that were below 80% of the average of the median, we're having issues affording rents or purchase of housing. That has now grown and extended into close to 100%, meaning the average income in a jurisdiction, be it Leelanau County or other jurisdictions, and in some markets, and I suspect Leelanau might be there well, it's above 100% of the area median income, okay? So this is on real dollars. In other words, the cost of housing is outpacing wages, income. Now, some people might say, yeah, Jim, you know what? That's just real dollars. The real measure is going to be when you look at it in percentages. In other words, percentage of income versus housing affordability. So, Lauren, if you click it, the slide, guess what? Here it is. Okay? So for the economists out there, they'll say, you know, we really need to look at it on an average or percentage basis. Look at the trend line. Okay? We're going north of 400%. Housing costs are 400% the average income in just nationally. I'll bet in here, you can probably tell me, it's higher than that. Okay? This is the point. The point is that across the nation and in every market, this situation is growing. And I'm not going to put blame on any party. Okay? It's not the builders charging more money, da, 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 da. It's not just the fact is that incomes are going here and prices are going here. And so this is a significant issue that needs to be solved, within which there is an opportunity to use tools to do it. Next slide, please. So before I get into the tool, I'm going to show you the problem with how tools exist today. This graph is showing you 80 area median income, okay? What programs that the government offers, whether it's federal or state of Michigan, to help households purchase or rent housing. Some of these programs you're familiar with. We'll start down the bottom. If you're at 0% income, right, or up to 30%, you're eligible for public housing and vouchers. Okay, federal funded. You know those tools, programs. You may know them. All right. And if you are from 30 to 60% AMI, you'd be eligible to rent. And in very few cases purchase, because very few low-income housing tax credit developers do for sale projects. But you're familiar with the low-income housing tax credit program, because I figure you probably had a few of those projects here in the county over the past years. So now we're up to 60% of AMI. And then up to 80% of area median income, area AMI, a household is eligible to be supported through the Community Development Block Grant Program or the Home Investment Partnership Program. Now, over on this side, where the open market here is where projects usually come into the state, like the Michigan Strategic Fund. They're part of economic development projects. They use perhaps the Brownfield program for infrastructure and site preparation and the like. They're actually housing projects which have needs that surround the housing. But those redevelopment projects, in fact, support housing at 120% or higher area median income. Here's the problem. There is no government program. There is literally no government, it has been little government thinking until recently about how we service that group in between, which, by the way, is now in the midst of having that affordability crisis. This group, 80 to 120, oh, by the way, these are your numbers, Leelanau County, okay? Thanks to Jeff, we pulled those out. So 80 to 120 AMI is 52 and some change, 78 and some change, okay? That's your area median income 2019, is that right? 2019. Okay.
Census.
Pardon me?
From the census.
From the census, yeah. So the issue here is that this is, in our opinion, non-scientific, where a chunk of the attainable housing issue is. There's a need to assist households to purchase or rent housing. It's not 100% assistance. It's a little bit of assistance to actually get them into a role where they can purchase or rent housing. We'll talk about purchase right now. Purchase or rent housing. And once they get that stuff up, they're going, because that helps them build wealth, build in their household. particularly if they're in early stage of adulthood, family formation, to go. But we are calling this attainable housing to distinguish it from affordable housing. This is the Alice population, right? If you're familiar with the research that's been done, asset limited, income constrained, but employed, okay? Single or two-person household, they're in this group as well. You have these households in your market, in your county. You know that better than I do. And guess what? They cannot be eligible. They're not eligible for this assistance over here, and they probably are not involved in what's up here as well. So they're stuck in the middle. So you can move the slide now. Lauren, thank you. So that's where we were at Land Bank internally about 4 years ago, with a group of county land banks coming out of our annual summit, our annual conference, talking about this issue. We have this issue, and land banks are in a unique position because land banks are getting properties, whether it's through tax foreclosure or through other means, or governmental units putting properties into the land banks. And in a number of communities, those would be primed for housing. Housing development for whom? Well, this is where we start to talk about, well, if there's support in the government to finance or help households at those lower area median income percentages, what about this group here? So we started to think about this, and then actually get into the statutes and think about how the tools could be used. That's where this slide comes from. I've been a brownfield practitioner for 25 years. I've been at the land bank for 5 years now. And one of the reasons I was asked by Governor Snyder back in the previous administration to go from mission to the land bank was to do this, try to find solutions to help actually get projects developed out in the field. Been a tremendous amount of studies, tremendous amount of programs set up, but the result is that there's still not enough action happening, particularly in outstate Michigan. So we started to look at this scenario, which is what's a land bank? What do land banks do under their statutory authority? And what do brownfields do? Do I have any brownfield authority members here for the county? No? Okay. When I talk about brownfield authorities, we do? Okay. All right. You're gonna be my brownfield guy for the day, okay? Okay. So let's talk about brownfield just to start here, okay? So you know then, and we know that brownfield authorities were created in the late 90s, and they traditionally have had this purpose of wanting to help projects which have environmental issues, okay? There's a site that's contaminated, or in some communities, there's a site that's blighted or functionally obsolete, and it needs assistance. It needs assistance because if there's no assistance provided for that development project, there's going to be no project because those issues are extraordinary costs to development. If you want to build a $3 to $4 million commercial industrial property building on a property that has $1 million in cleanup costs because it was contaminated such and such, the fact is that developer cannot handle that $1 million extra cost in its pro forma and build and operate the $3 or $4 million commercial industrial building or mixed use building, whatever it may be. And so the advent of the brownfield program was to provide a mechanism to offset extraordinary costs, not to over-incent developers to make them super-duper rich, but to cover those costs. So extraordinary cost is the concept I want you to hear and think about as we go into this. So one other point about brownfield, BRA, Act 381. There's only 4 locations in the entire act where the word brownfield is used. In the title, in the preamble, and in the description of a brownfield plan and a brownfield authority. The rest of that act talks about eligible properties and eligible activities and how you go through the system and such and such. So another kind of twist on language today I'm going to propose to you is that you consider it's not the Brownfield Redevelopment Financing Act, which is what its title is, but it really is the parcel-based Tax Increment Financing Act, for within which contaminated sites, brownfields, those are true brownfields, or blighted properties, or functionally obsolete properties, and land bank properties. People don't know that. Land bank properties in that act are eligible by virtue of their ownership or control of a land bank. No other condition required. All right, I can see head shaking. I'm glad. I want you to understand this. Right. I don't want to get too into the weeds with you. I want you to understand this, which is that the whole system for 25 years of operating brownfield development, which is good, but the truth is it's actually a development financing act that can support project-based of various criteria, of which land bank is one of those criteria. Now, over with land bank, the land bank act came about a few years later, mostly in response to issues going on in some of the larger urban cities and abandonment of properties and needing to get understanding of title or other documentary issues of distress, but some were also contaminated. So the legislature at that time, well, I know this because we went back and did the research. We looked at the committee reports. And the legislators and the LSVs were talking about utilizing the 381 redevelopment TIF program to support land banks. And so when you look in Act 381, that's where land banks are eligible properties by direct. And in Act 258, it provides the authority for land banks to utilize Act 381 to develop or redevelop their properties. The point that I'm getting at is that this was intended, this mix was, or this linkage was intended, but it was never connected in the field because two schools of practice grew. In the mid-90s, after 96, 97, again, Jeff and I have talked about this a number of times. In the late 90s, the brownfield practice started to grow, okay? And then in the mid-2000s, the land bank community practice started to grow. And there has been some kind of separation between the two practices, a few linkages that happen in time. What I'm going to tell you today here is that you have the not only the power, but you have the capacity in your staff and your leadership to do this. Link them up, right? Because guess what? I hold this with help from Jeff. Right off, these are the missions of your county DRA. Provide resources and expertise to help investigate, clean up, eliminate, blight, and return properties to productive reuse. Hold that. Over here, land bank has tax base by returning tax converted properties to tax rolls and partner community stakeholders, redevelop properties, the workforce housing, economic development, workforce housing, economic development, put properties to reuse. You got the ingredients to put them together. Now you can't actually like merge the entities. But you can actually get them to work together and understand how they can operate together and make projects happen, such as affordable housing. Next slide. For those of you who, when I use the phrase tax increment financing, and you might not understand quite what that means, this is intended to be a graphic representation. This is time on the x-axis, and this is value on the y-axis. So if you imagine that property that has, think of it as a contaminated site, that example I told, $1 million in cleanup on a site, there's a $4 million project proposed. Okay, well, the base value, that property has a value today, okay, fictionally, but it's a low value because it's a contaminated site. The concept of the parcel-based brownfield redevelopment TIF is kind of like the other TIFs, but it's focused on the property. When Tischler Enterprises wants to do that $4 million building, you will assemble and do a brownfield plan, assuming you want to do this project, and you would agree that you would allow for the development to occur, but that the incremental increase from this point, once I build a project building and I start paying taxes, that the increase that's captured can be used to repay the cost that I undertook to clean up the site for $1 million. In other words, the captured taxes of in the future, if I proceed to build, are used to reimburse my extraordinary costs, thus making me whole so that I can actually make my pro forma work, build the building, and the world is good.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah.
Just to add to that, I think it's important to understand that those extra costs, typically, I mean, probably when you go to the bank, so let's say if you're going to put an addition on your house, or you're going to build a house or a building, lending institutions are all about, providing a loan to you to do that, get that financing. But those extra costs, demolition, asbestos abatement, all these other things we're talking about, bank doesn't want to loan you money for that. They want brick and mortar. And so that's why we have to find another tool here, like we're talking about, to help offset those. those costs.
And on top of that, if you go to the bank and try that and they look at their perform bond, they say you're upside down because that's more cost than you get revenue on the property. So technically and financially, it ain't going to happen unless this intercede happens. So while that's happening, I'm going to get at some of the other issues out there because there might be some taxing jurisdictions and entities out there that are saying, oh, wait a minute. Why are you taking the taxes that should go to the county, the village, the city, even the schools, okay, to do this? Well, two answers. One is the current value that before this project gets started is still going to pay the taxing jurisdictions. But secondly is a real key principle. And I'm going to say it just direct, okay, polite but direct, which is without this coverage of extraordinary cost, there ain't going to be no future taxes for the county, the city, the schools, or anybody else, okay? This is because of its extraordinary cost reimbursement or the extraordinary cost contingency. The contingency is to offset extraordinary costs in order to promote development. So that's the policy basis. And the reason that the taxing jurisdiction lobbies in Lansing have always supported brownfield parcel-based redevelopment TIF is because they know when the project ends, okay, that $1 million was paid off to me. The plan ends, and then all that new value is going to pay, or to the county, the city, the township, the village, the schools. Did I miss anybody? Okay, all the tax jurisdictions. So it really is an investment to provide future revenue to governmental entities. And that has been understood pretty well for about 25 years. Okay, and that's why there's really never been an issue politically with parcel-based redevelopment TIF. There are issues with district TIFs. We'll talk about that another time. But with that's the case. So the properties return the tax rolls, and I talked to you about there. I talked about the bridge. Next slide. I feel like I'm talking to somebody in the heavens. Next slide. All right. So here's our problem. We need more housing. We need more housing, period, or we really need more housing to help those households with incomes in the 80 to 120 range because they have no help from nowhere. Okay? And the way we do it, can do it, if we use the tools, is to help the developers produce housing to make this happen. Now, the interesting element to this is that if we use the tools right, the developers actually become the delivery vehicle. Who are the households? Who are the real beneficiaries? The households that are needing assistance to purchase those housing units. And I'm going to show you that here in a little bit as well. So we need this as well. And outstate, in the urban centers of Southeast Michigan and Lansing, Kalamazoo, there's a good amount of capacity. There's staffs, there's budgets, stuff's happening like that. You know, you got good staff here, all right? But your good staff has day jobs, all right? They're doing a lot of other things. Your chief planner here is doing a lot of planning, doing a lot of work, okay? The issue is that there is limited capacity, time capacity to do this type of work in outstate Michigan. And in some counties, zero capacity out there. And so the need is to provide assistance for communities to do that. Again, ergo, helping communities find revenue sources through tools like this to make it happen. Now, I certainly talk about this issue of overuse in herding schools. It's just, when I hear this, these comments and concerns about from local officials or even brethren state agencies or officials, I love to respond to them because the parameter discussion of TIF hurts, takes taxes away is a fallacy when you look at it in a redevelopment context, right? And in the housing realm, this is where the transition really is important because I've talked about this extraordinary cost to cover on a cleanup site. Well, the philosophical shift is that extraordinary cost is not just the cleanup or assessment cleanup on site, it's the need to help that household go from mortgage limit at this amount to the ability to actually purchase that housing. That is the philosophical shift that's underwriting all this, which is we are defining the gap between ability to purchase and rent housing of households as an extraordinary cost, which needs assistance, and TIF is a tool that can help that assistance if it's structured correctly. I want to say that again, because that's the new wrinkle here. It's based on a philosophical shift that extraordinary cost, which is traditionally in that reimbursement of environmental or other preparation costs, has now been shifted to mean it's the gap for a household to be able to go from what they can mortgage from the bank which isn't enough to get to able to mortgage a house. Because the same principles apply. It's an extraordinary cost. If that cost is covered, the purchase will happen. Taxes will get paid. Social and economic benefit will accrue. Household wealth will increase. All those things benefit, like it does in the commercial industrial world for brownfield sites. Here it is now in the housing context for households and citizens. Next slide. The reason that Act 381 TIF is a good solution is not just the base concept, but it's scalable. This can be worked down to the single parcel. Let me show you that in a slide in a few minutes. This could be multiple parcels. It could be a scattering of parcels. Because if our brownfield expert in the room knows that an eligible property can be a subject parcel, anything adjacent and contiguous to it. Or it could be this eligible property, and this eligible property, and this eligible property. And at county level, as a county brownfield authority, you really have the ability to work across jurisdictions. So the scalability benefit or opportunity is there. By definition, I will tell you, we would submit that this is a tangible public benefit to provide assistance to households to obtain housing, which actually stabilizes their ability to be productive in the communities, in the society, and start their way to build wealth, has multiple public benefits. But there are other benefits too, which is to help move sites which otherwise might not be helped into productive reuse, provide infrastructure or other support elements to local communities or counties and such. So there is the reason, the benefit or opportunity for land banks is not just them working themselves, but working in partnership with a local government unit who has that property over here that they've been owning for about 15 years, but it really has no purpose. It's just they own it. Maybe they had a project that didn't happen, or they got it on tax reversion or tax foreclosure at some point in time long ago, but there's no use. Well, let the land bank have control of that property, or put it in the land bank, you still keep control, and then you can actually, those municipalities can see something happen with it. And I talked about homeownership and rental benefits already with the households. Next slide.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah.
Just something that might be relative here too is that, there's been a number, especially years back, where developments have started and have stopped or have not gone to completion. So this might be another opportunity as well, looking at areas that are just sitting there. The infrastructure is already there perhaps, or partially there, but yet you've got lots that are buildable, ready to roll, but they're not building on them.
Thank you for saying that. You just described my meeting yesterday down in Wexford County in Cadillac with Habitat for Humanity. In the Cadillac area, there are multiple, I don't know how many, but I was told that there are multiple residential plats that have infrastructure that haven't been built out. So I said to the group, come, next meeting, tell us what they are. I'd like to find out that. Well, the opportunity is then a land bank getting involved with a Habitat or other party there and going to the developer and saying, we can be of assistance, because the reason that they're unbuilt is the developers are in this conundrum too. The cost for them to build yields a selling price of X. And the market can purchase at Y, and there's a gap. And so the unbuilt lots in a plat or in a subdivision is the result of the developer can't sell the units at their minimal cost because the market is not able to afford to purchase those units. And so that's where there's benefit that would accrue to builder, developer, but not them. It helps the purchaser get ability to purchase those units. So what it does is it incents the builder developer market to get back and infilling those unbuilt lots in the neighborhood in those plats. And so, yes.
Have you find developers willing to transfer ownership to the land bank on properties that they're just sitting on very often? I mean, we find that property value is, rising so much that it's just an investment they're sitting on.
Yeah. In this county, Friday speculation from Jim Tischler, here it comes. In this county, maybe not so much. You please correct me, but I sense that the builder market is focused on the luxury custom end in this county, okay? Because you've got because you have beautiful country up here. You know the factors behind that, all right? But other counties, not so much, okay? So, and I have an example to show you in Oakland County of a site, which actually that has happened. So in other counties where that need comes, it's starting to happen because the builder developers, with no other choice to go, if they are open-minded to consider that they might be able to, and they're willing to provide tangible public benefit, such as providing housing options for attainable households, maybe even affordable, and we're in mix with their market rates, then that really opens the door for them. So I think it's going to be a growth area for the builder developer. The Home Builders Association is part of the Housing Coalition. Yarrow Brown's here, she knows that. The home builders, they're totally on board with this. The Home Builders, the Michigan Home Builders Association, that's the association. So it's going to take time for them to spread that information out to their members. And again, the two examples I'm going to show you, I think you're going to see that, but maybe not here yet. That's my ultimate view. So I've talked about this in other presentations, really technical and such, and I was told, Jim, you get too much in the weeds. So let's just lay out for what it is. Every property that comes into ownership or control of a land bank is automatically eligible property under the Redevelopment TIF Act, period. No exceptions. By virtue of ownership or control, that's the case. So it doesn't have to be contaminated, it doesn't have to be blighted, it does not have to be obsolete. Let's take that situation that Chris, you just mentioned, which is a builder developer wanted to have assistance. If they agreed to provide temporary title of that lot to the land bank, the moment that title switched or shifted, it's an eligible property. Now, I've heard some people in other states and other agencies say, whoa, that's not how you should use Act 381 for a redevelopment TIF. And my response is, really? Go look at the language. You tell me. Okay? Right? We actually did the work behind the scenes. We had our attorneys, is the Attorney General, right? So we had an opinion done. You know what they said? It's in the law. It's in the law. Okay? So all properties a land bank comes into control, whether it's permanent, temporary, or otherwise, is eligible. And eligible for all activities. This is another key phrase. I used to have a slide. It's a really big slide. All the eligible activities under the Redevelopment TIF Act, you have environmental activities, assessment, cleanup stuff, we've been talking about that. Then you've got these extra special benefits for urban cities and villages which is infrastructure, site preparation, and in addition to environmental stuff. Core communities, you may have heard that phrase. In outstate Michigan, not as many qualified here in Leelanau, 0. Right, there we go. Okay, thank you.
With one little exception, and that's area that Traverse City has on the very south border.
Okay, so for years, going back to the days working with the brownfield groups, that was an issue out there, which is how do you help smaller communities in rural areas outstate if they're not core? And there's good reasons set up early to do that, which is we want to encourage reinvestment in urban centers. But it can't be an absolute wall, okay? It can't be, we're just gonna help urban centers and rural areas, well, you guys are out of luck. So in the Act, land bank properties are eligible for environmental and non-environmental, okay? All those special benefits, no matter where that property is located in the state. That's a key phrase, which is a land bank property is a super TIF eligible property under law, period. Plus, there's a section after that which says, so eligible for this, everything above, that's what the language says, plus assistance to a land bank fast track authority in clearing or quieting title or selling or otherwise conveying property owned or under control by that land bank fast track authority, or the acquisition of property by that land bank fast track authority. So land banks are really a super TIF authority. They don't have the power to TIF yet. They have to work with their 381 brownfield authority. But eligibility wise, land banks are like top of the food chain. Okay? You can do anything on a land bank property. And that's also something that's really not well known, even in the land bank. Your staff knows this because we've been talking about it, but in other counties, the land bank community just doesn't understand that yet because they've been focused on foreclosed properties and the fees on that and trying to work that property stuff through, and it's all good stuff. but there's all this other ability of potential in the statutes, like I mentioned to you, which just haven't been picked up. So we're going to build on this now. Next slide.
Hey, Jim?
Yeah.
Before we go.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Sorry,
go back.
go back.
Go back. Sorry.
Sorry, Laura. I think the last 3 words of that paragraph are important too, from a standpoint of
Yeah.
what the statute and what the legislators all intended when they put this together.
Mhm.
That they see selling and conveying and working with housing and so forth as true economic development. I mean, 'cause
Correct.
it's something that you need in your communities in order to be able to support the people that support the people that want to live there.
Yep. If it sounds like it's odd, because you guys know it down in Lansing, it's kind of being realized now, which is, housing is economic development.
It's
Well,
not about,
why is that? Well, we have more housing, we have more exchange going on in communities, we have more social, financial, economic, ecological, physiological exchange going on. And guess what? That's what makes prosperity happen. I'm laughing just because I'm thinking about some conversations I've had fleeting in my mind with some folks where housing is not economic development. And to me, I'm like, where? That's rooted in historic and traditional practices of economic development, community development, housing, and such. Okay, that's the discipline and the training of, we understand it from the practice that we've come from, inside out. The flip needs to be the case. It's all part of prosperity generation, and it can and should be mixed to make it happen. So thanks for bringing that up.
I mean, how many people here have children that maybe grew up here, maybe you lived here, grew up, your families, and your desire is to have your children stay here in this community? Can they, as a young entrepreneur coming out of school or getting their first job or whatever, afford to live here? And yet you want them to live here? A lot of people in these rural areas, they leave. The kids leave because they can't live there. They can't afford to live there.
So they're now contributing to the economic prosperity of blank, you fill it in, okay, where they could be contributing to the economic prosperity of Leelanau County. Yeah. Okay, now you can move the slide. Thank you. So here we go. I showed that phrase. That's literally in the statute. Assistance in selling or conveying property owned by land bank. So let's say land bank's working with a developer or builder on a property. Like these couple examples I talked about, that unbuilt lot in the plat, or this property, or bringing somebody in working in partnership with land bank. So Trudy's construction company is going to get to the business of building a house. And don't laugh at the numbers, please. I know they're a little different up here, all right? Okay, so 190, it'd be great if we had some 190 houses up here, right? Okay, 190 is the cost of construction to sell, okay? Sell it out. Well, Jeff is the willing party, but he's Al's householder. He's making 100% AMI, and he goes to his bank to buy a house, and the bank's, you've got an income, your wife's got an income, such and such. Based on your incomes, you're pre-approved for a mortgage up to $150,000, right? Okay, well, that's great, except that sale ain't gonna happen, right? Because there's a gap. Now, one might say, well, the developers play with money, or with costs and such. This is just baseline numbers. There's a gap. This is that crisis out there with the attained in the 80 to 120 range. They're making income, but they can't afford to purchase that house, okay? Because the cost of the housing is, and the revenues or incomes are like this. So there's not funny yet. There won't be a sale, and there probably won't be a house constructed either, okay? However, if the arrangement were set up where the seller, Trudy is the builder. Trudy says, okay, Jeff, here's the deal. I'll concede $40,000 to make the selling price $150,000. Jeff says, game on. I'm buying that house. I'm a happy camper. I'm in the house and such. All right. Now, what has Trudy, developer, just done? She has conceded that $40,000 in value to sell the house. She is engaged in the act of assistance to sell or convey a property which was owned by a land bank. You see the connection? That was the realization 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago, which was The language allowing for affordable housing development by land banks was always in front of us for 15 years. We never looked at it this way. Because the standard way of thinking is land bank, it's assistance, administrative costs for a land bank to sell a property that comes into this jurisdiction, okay? But it can be interpreted alternatively. And that's the language that was signed off by our attorneys, the AG, which is, yeah, it's plain English. If you make an arrangement that that's the case, that can be done. Now, Trudy's so short of $40,000. So if she does that a few times, she's out of business, right? So where's that $40,000 come from? Well, here it is. That's an eligible activity under Act 381. So if that house gets built and Jeff buys it and Jeff pays his taxes, the taxes that he pays can be captured and used for eligible activities, such as paying a gap loan of $40,000, which comes in from a local bank or a community development financial institution or economic development fund of local or otherwise, or any source that recognizes that if you have that stream of revenue, just like the $1 million cleanup cost and approval of plan for a commercial industrial site, if I get that brownfield plan approved by the authority, I'm going to the bank and I'm saying I want 2 loans. I want my construction loan, and if I'm bankable my construction loan, then what I want is in addition to that is a line of credit for the cost for the cleanup. And the guarantee to that is that the government approved a TIF plan that will say if I build and produce and pay taxes, that tax will be captured, and that's your revenue going back to you, lender, for that gap. Same thing here. It's the same thing, except it's a loan to provide for the gap to allow the household to purchase a unit. And guess what? It amortizes out. Now, this is a fictitious example.
Question.
Yes, sir.
The taxable value of that piece of property, is it the 150,000 or is it the 190,000? In other words, is the buyer getting taxed on the lower appraisal or the?
It'd be at 190.
Okay.
Because the closing, you imagine this, the closing would be the seller's she's gonna sell the house at 190, okay, still. But he's bringing in 150 and a second source is coming in to cover the gap. So the closing will be for the total of 190. So she's not losing any money effectively. What she's doing is she's setting up the structure where a bridge loan necessary, a gap loan for that to come in, and the source of that gap loan is future tax payments captured and guaranteed by the brownfield plan approved by the governing body, and then probably memorialized in a reimbursement agreement, which says, you collect taxes once or twice a year. Twice a year. Okay, so after winter or summer taxes, okay, the treasurer is going to take that money that's collected, the captured money, and they're going to direct it to the Bank of Yarrow. Okay, right? And so Bank of Yarrow's happy because she's got an agreement, which is this money's coming to me, and it amortizes out. Now, don't laugh at these numbers. It's just set up, right? Maybe it's 3%. I don't know, but $40,000. Based on a tax capture of units is going to be and it's probably about a 15-year in this fictitious example. But based upon values and such, you're going to have an amortization schedule, okay, which is what happens with these reimbursement loans for commercial, industrial sites and brownfield sites. And now I'm showing it to you what I can do in a residential sense. So in other words, this gap is going to get repaid, and this is showing you how households can purchase. And this can happen at a single parcel level, and it can happen at multiple parcel levels. And it really is interesting, if you think about it, if it's a mixed income housing project. Because when you have market rate units mixed in with, or lots mixed in, or units, mixed in with attainable or affordables, what you're getting is, because brownfield, guess what, 381, you can capture the subject parcel and adjacent and contiguous properties. Okay, so you could take that neighborhood and you could do this TIF plan and capture the taxes, not just to help out that household, but capture the market rate houses, the market rate units that sell. You'd be able to capture those taxes, and there's no subsidy there, eligible activity costs. So my point is that if you do it in a mixed use arrangement, these reimbursement terms are probably going to go down to less than 5 years. Now, the Bank of Yarrow will be really happy about that, okay? Now, 2 other questions, all right? One is, because I've heard this out in the field, One is, well, what happens if property values stagnate or go down? You know, because that happened in 2009, maybe not here, but in some other places, it happened in 2009. Okay, well, in Act 381, a brownfield plan is a projection, okay? But the fact in the statute says that a plan is approving not the cost of activities, but the activities. And the result of approval of a plan is that that plan will stay in place until the cost of the eligible activities is paid or reimbursed, right? So what does that mean? That means it's projected to be 15 years here, or whatever that period of time. You know, my commercial industrial example, it might be 7 years. But if property values stagnate in year 3 or go down in year 4, well, guess what happens? The plan stays in effect and continues to capture. It might be an additional year or 2 years until the cost of the approved activity is paid. So to the Bank of Euro, that's a guarantee. That $40,000 is going to come back to you, bank, okay? You might have in that agreement a kicker that if there's a delay in the AM schedule, that your interest rate's going to bump, okay? Why? Because she's got investor money, right? And she's got to make all those, you know, make those investors happy too. Well, that's okay, because guess what? The plan's going to continue to capture until the cost of the eligible activities and financing of those activities is paid in whole. So in other words, this is about as secure. Oh, one more point. Sorry, forgot to mention this. Jeff will never do this. But let's just imagine somebody taking that house and deciding for one reason or another that they're just not going to pay their taxes, or they're going to walk away, or what have you, right? So, well, that might be a problem. Well, let's think about what happens if somebody doesn't pay their taxes. John Gallagher says after year 1, you're delinquent, okay? And you have penalty, pay your taxes. After year 2, if you don't pay, John Gallagher says you're double delinquent and you have to pay even more penalties, but pay your taxes. And in year 3, if you don't pay your taxes, John Gallagher says, strike 3, you're out. I'm foreclosing on your property, okay? Now, in each of those years, who is actually paying the taxes on those properties if I'm not paying it, or if I'm not paying the taxes? It's your county's tax delinquent fund. You have one, right? Right? So in year 1, year 2, year 3, the county's tax delinquency fund is actually paying those taxes. And guess what? They're being captured to go back to pay the Bank of Euro. And in year 3, when John forecloses, then with Trudy's help, they're actually going to put that property out for auction. Somebody's going to buy it. And in this scenario, you could require the purchase of that auction as a payoff of the remaining note to the Bank of Euro. What I'm saying is that this is perhaps one of the most secure arrangements you could set up, because it's not tied to an agreement. It's not just tied to an agreement. It's an agreement backed up by a plan, backed up by the county, backed up by the tax delinquency fund, and ultimately backed up by foreclosure if necessary to make it happen and resale. So I hope you're happy, Bank of Euro. You've got a secure note that you can put out there, and you could make, and you can roll it. There it goes. Are there questions on that? I wanted to get in a little bit here so you understood how not the actual that site mechanics, but generally how these mechanics work. Because again, this is not yet well understood out in the field. Yes, sir.
To make this work, does the land bank have to get into the chain of title? Do they have to own this property at some point?
At the present time, they do. Okay. Now, what does that look like? It could look at multiple arrangements. If allow me to do this. If I'm Leelanau County Land Bank, okay, what I might be doing is making arrangements with my developers, whoever they are, for-profit, not-profit developers. I'm saying we're going to go into these properties as partnerships. Okay. My role as land bank is I'm simply going to hold title. You're going to hold me harmless. And I'm simply going to hold title to help to keep this qualified so we can go. And then when all the other things are performed, when come times to closing, well, we'll show up at closing and we'll just convey title as part of the closing. There could be other arrangements made, but that's the most simple one that I think that would exist. So the land bank's role really is not, they don't have a fiduciary responsibility in the development. They don't have any risk in the development. They're simply holding title and held harmless by that developer partner that they work with.
Do you have examples of those agreements? I think John at Homestretch has one, but can you share those, or could we share those at all? Blocking out names. I mean, it's
Agreements of
that transaction or how that works to have the land bank hold it. or some sort of agreement?
We have examples of land banking agreements, yes, absolutely,
That
yes.
might be
I can share that with you. There's, some of them are a little complex, but the principal factors are there. And I say, yeah, we can show them.
I have one more question.
Catch up with me and we'll do that, okay? Yeah, you bet.
Does this have to be used for those in the 80 to 20% AMI, or can it be used for other projects below 80%?
No, you can use it for, I'm focused on 80 to 20 because that's where we see the key and the missing gap is.
And plus there's other tools. for
And there's other
those
tools, but let's assume your household's AMIs are below 80%, okay? Because that's reality. My opinion would be, back to this idea of a mixed income project, okay? Where you, like simple for right now, it's a 20 unit project, okay? So you set up, or 30 unit, let me make it simple, 30 units, because that divides easy. Okay, 30 unit project, and you have 10 units or 10 houses, whatever it is. It could be a building too, but it could be a condo building, whatever. 10 units are affordable. You can, go 50% AMI. 10 units are attainable, 80 to 119. 10 units are open market rate. What's going to happen is that those open market rates are going to be helping to subsidize, in addition to the tax captures, those attainables and those affordable units. So now you've got a tool to say, let's calculate this out. I want to actually do mixed income housing in my community, which probably should be the case anyways, right? But you can actually design that so that you can have X units, and if you have sufficient number of market rates in that, then you're going to use them actually as financial vehicles to help you cover the cost of the deeper subsidies on those below 80% AMI units. Yeah.
But I would say probably a single shot project for going below 80% and down.
On a single house?
That makes it a little
Yeah,
harder.
it might be
The
tricky
numbers
on
were-
that, because on a
that
house,
gap would be too big.
think of yourself, if you all, one minute you own houses, so you're paying taxes twice a year, and what's your total tax payment you're paying? Okay, so that's kind of what your limitation is on a single unit, but now multiply it by 20 or 30, and now you can see that there's some value there, right? That could be captured and used. Next slide. More. So with this information, one of the questions that comes back to us, and we started already, which is, okay, Jim, how do you do this? There's a lot of moving pieces here. It's going to be up to how you locally construct the program. But if this helps you, we started to kind of put through a flow chart, a task flow chart about how you might go about to organize and structure these types of projects, whether it's 1 unit or 30 units or somewhere in between. So first is, what are your needs? Okay, and how do you, what's your market? What's going on in your market? What do you need, unit-wise, building type-wise, at incomes? Housing needs studies are good, but in my opinion, they're not enough. Because, okay, you identified your need. For what, right? And the needs studies are usually, we need housing to cover these income gaps. Of what, okay? So that needs to be a really comprehensive approach, whether it's target market analysis or supply demand or some combination, understanding actually not just the need, but the opportunities that then you could then reach out and engage in partnership opportunities with your private developer community, either in community or bringing them into community. So whatever those needs are, then comes how you organize. Because this is not, land bank's just but one piece. Okay, it's a anchor piece, but it's just one piece. You have a system here that needs to be set up. Here I've talked about this a few times. You need to set up a system with all players who understand that it needs to be a housing production system. This is one of the, in my opinion, one of the issues out there, which is, and I've seen this in other presentations with other communities. Yes, we need to do this. Yes, we need to do this. Okay, and the meeting ends, and everybody agrees we need to do it. But who's going to pick up the ball and run? And it's not just one person, one agency, one organization. It needs to be structured to actually operate as a collaborative, because this is actually a development system that has to be put together. And that's one of the key fall downs in some communities, which is, we need to do it, I'm going back to my day job. Okay. I'm telling you, you have the ability to generate revenue to support this, but you have to organize and bring in key players. It's not just your land bank, it's not just your brownfield, your 381 Brown Authority, it's not just your developers, it's just actually organizing. And communities have decided, there's a range. Some have literally organized informal collaboratives. Some have, like our conversation with folks in Sault Ste. Marie a few weeks back, they're literally, they proposed, Chippewa County doesn't have a land bank, the city of Sault Ste. Marie proposed entering into an Act 7 intergovernmental agreement with the state land bank to create a housing development entity. They want to take their 50 lots that they own, they want to drop them in our state land bank, and they want us to help work with them to actually put the mechanics together and making their development program work, help them solicit developers, such and such. And then what was our response? I like seeing freighters, so when you want me to come up? Okay, right. I mean, that's what we'll do. I'm not telling you you should do it that way, but one of the things to take away from is that whatever your needs are, we will help you. Okay? So
So Jim, the state land bank can acquire properties anywhere in the state.
we can. My suggestion is work with your local land bank first, okay? And if you have a local land bank that might be just getting off the ground and isn't really familiar with that, then have your local land bank or your local land bank reach out to us. Because same thing, like here with Trudy in Leelanau Land Bank, is our role here is we're gonna go shoulder to shoulder, and we will bring and help this to go, help you do this. We will put our time, effort, personnel, energy to help you, local land bank, actually work this to go. At some point in time, you're gonna be up and running and go, and you're good. So, but we feel our role is to be the consultant and technical assistance support to the land bank community across, and the local unit government community, but especially land banks. So yes, however that opportunity arises, you can go. And if there's a county that doesn't have a land bank, well, that's not true. You have a land bank, okay, like Chippewa. So back here, what are the specifics? Where are your sites? What are the technical needs? Down in Emmett County, we've had conversations about a site that they wanted to do, which has infrastructure needs, and I said, land bank, game on, let's go, okay? So probably this whole idea of actually how you get into the detailed mechanics of how you operate. Set up an initial project, maybe with an initial plan and a budget to that. You might want to pilot it, okay? With an example, just so you can test drive how the mechanics work. Now, identify or think through what those land transaction ranges are going to be involved here, like we just started to talk about. You might want to have land bank ownership of that property or control that property at a certain point in the process where everything, the other pieces are working with and evolve around it and such. So you map or think through what those mechanics would be. This idea of holding escrow, that's the land bank's key role, is land bank can hold that property, and as you know now, by virtue of its holding the property in title and escrow, we call it, it's not a technical escrow, it's a conceptual escrow. We're simply holding the title to help qualify this project and make it go. And then it comes out of escrow, comes out of the land bank at the right time. Next slide. So you're following this flow chart, okay, over here, which subject to the arrangements and structures, if we get into that and hold that title, then it moves to this arrangement where the project is live and coming forward. It actually gets in front of your authority, sir, and you consider those eligible activities and eligible on the eligible property controlled or owned by the land bank. Now, the way the Act says is this: is that a property must be owned or controlled by a land bank at the time that the governing body of the municipality, county, city, village, township, approves the brownfield plan, okay? So it can come at any time before, but it has to be in ownership control land bank that night that the governing body is considering that brownfield plan. Not you, it's not your authority, but the governing body. And the moment that that plan gets approved and certified by resolution and gets filed, certified, as you, whatever your local process is, then anytime after that, the property can transfer out of the land bank. Okay, so you got to be in that window, but outside of that, you have open flexibility to make whatever arrangements or structure that you deem is beneficial or necessary in your local operation, which is right here. Property plan, land banks can quiet title because they need to control property, and there's or get control of property, and there's exceptions to title. Land banks, I should have mentioned this. Land banks are probably one of the most powerful real estate entities under law in Michigan. Because land banks can do everything that any other entity can do for real estate. Own, purchase, lease, interest and such. Plus, land banks have fast track quiet title authority. What does that mean? We get control of property. It's one of the principal reasons land banks came into being. You get a control of property and might have cloud on the title because owners walked away or this interest and stuff like that. In a nutshell, here's how it goes. Land banks petition the circuit court, local circuit court, for quiet title action. And the court says, okay, land bank, you're bringing your information on your records and such. Nope, I accept it. Now, we're going to put out a notice in newspaper general circulation, and any interest that you can find, and you just have to simply do simple research for interests out there. You are noticed 21 days, there will be a show cause hearing. Okay, and whoever comes up at that 21-day hearing, they have to show cause as to why they're the right title owner. And if nobody shows up or they don't show a sufficient cause, judge has the ability to, and does, vest title in the land bank and quashes all other interests in title. Right? Now, some real estate interests out there have a hard time with that, right? And our response to that is, you have a hard time? Go find your interests and prove it, okay? Because guess what? The government, these properties, this got started in land banking in Flint and Detroit areas where you had massive clouds and titles of properties. And the need is to actually move properties for better use. And if you've got clouds of people who aren't known out there, you got to find a way to deal with that because somebody may have died. Where are these people out there? So that's where the quiet title, fast track quiet title process comes. It may be necessary, it probably not, but they'll be there. But then you need the property back. When you development occurs, you release those units. Land banks are allowed to collect half the taxes of new value for 5 years. That's what's known as the 550. Does that ring a bell to anybody? Okay. That's really important. Some people might say, well, why is land bank in the chain? You're getting taxes out of this. By the way, it doesn't affect the brownfield because the brownfield will still capture to pay off those costs, as I told you about. But this is important. And it's the capacity issue I told you about earlier. It's because the 550 or the eligible property tax specific, blah, blah, blah. I always forget that. There is no good acronym for that. Okay? The 550 is one, perhaps it's one of, but I think it's the main line revenue generator for land banks. So if land banks don't get revenue to participate in the program, you know what happens? And can be on land banks. Okay? So you do this to not only help get these projects going, but actually strengthen your land bank to do more of these projects. That's what this is all about. And the brownfield plan captures, cuts the rest, like we talked. Next slide.
Hey, Jim.
So can I just restate what you said so I have a good understanding? You're saying that in the first 5 years, half of the TIF goes to the land bank where it's operating or whatever.
Correct.
And the other half goes to the lender.
Right, pro rata. Well, or when it's captured, it would be captured. That's correct.
It's captured by the brownfield
Right.
and then distributed to the appropriate.
I'm commingling two things here. Let's separate 381 from 258, 2A. The Land Bank Act says that if a land bank disposes of property to a non-exempt party, then they are entitled to half of the taxes generated for the next 5 years, going back now for the purpose you talked about. The Brownfield Act says you approve a plan and you're capturing taxes to pay for those costs, okay? So the bringing together is that this sale occurs on a property that a Brownfield or 381 plan was approved. So that half goes, and the other half then is captured, okay? And then in year 6, when that 550 ends, the full amount of increase in value then goes to the Brownfield plan for the term necessary to pay the cost of the eligible activities that were approved.
And then after the 5 years, the brownfield would take all of that.
Right.
Which would escalate the payback.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Hey, Jim, I just wanted to mention,
Yeah.
specific to Leelanau County, I think it's important to understand that Leelanau County has only one brownfield redevelopment authority and obviously has a land bank authority. But because it's a county authority, the statute requires if we're going to do a brownfield plan, that we have to get concurrence from the local unit of government where the project is occurring in order to get that plan approved. So before ultimately the governing body, which would be the Board of Commissioners through a public hearing, would adopt the brownfield plan. So there's kind of a check and balance there from a standpoint of the county just can't solo, or the brownfield authority can't just do a brownfield plan on a project without the local unit concurring with that plan.
Yep. And you might have other local requirements that you've set up to operate your brownfield work as well. So whatever those policies are, they would be applicable to this as well. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Going back a little bit, I'm not trying to get into the weeds, but in that $190,000 example, at closing, the landowner, the home purchaser has warranty deed.
Mhm.
There's a first mortgage against it
Mhm.
for 75% of the value or something like that. And then the $40,000 loan is a second mortgage.
It could be, but it doesn't have to be.
When the home sells, the guy after 10 years wants to move up to a better house.
Okay. Yep.
Does the $40,000 loan get paid off?
It could be. Now, where I'm getting in is that that's subject to how you locally construct your program. Okay. You might require that be the arrangement. You don't have to require that, but that's where I'm getting at. You can craft it how you wish. You could, but I want to get to that second note because it can be a mortgage if you wanted to, but the Bank of Yarrow might not be happy if there's a second mortgage for a value when she's got the first mortgage.
Well, no, the $40,000, the Bank of Euro takes the second mortgage on it.
Right. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. Yeah. So the first lender, okay, might not be happy when she takes the second mortgage. So doesn't have to be a mortgage. It simply can be a note. And the note is secured by the property taxes, not the house. That's what's key. All right. In other words, there's a reimbursement agreement that says when taxes are paid, whoever and however taxes are paid on that property, it's going to be captured and it's going to go to pay that second note. So that first mortgage is Jeff's mortgage by the bank to there. But Yarrow's loan is a loan on the property taxes, which goes and effectively would represent potential equity in that deal to go for that house. Now, having said that, that concept can be structured in multiple ways to make that happen. But for sure, I'm going to tell you that it does not have to be structured as a second mortgage because it's not it's covering the cost of the homeowner to purchase on it. And so it's secured by the taxes that the homeowner pays. And it doesn't have to be tied directly to the homeowner. It's tied to the taxes paid on the property. That's another element too. Hopefully I'm being clear here with you. So you recognize this, that you can structure this to be separate from the mortgage if necessary.
So even if the house is sold in year 10, it's going to be for more than 190,000. So that 40,000, the Eurobank gets paid out quicker. So going back to the first day when the homeowner takes the keys and moves in.
Yep.
He bought a house with no money down, probably didn't need private mortgage insurance because the first lender has equity in it. And there's no consequence if he doesn't stay there until the whole $40,000 loan is paid off.
So I'm back. My answer is the same as I said before, which is now you can craft a program to cover conditions like you want a homeowner to perhaps present 5% of equity, maybe not and such. You want to have a resale provision on the house that has, if they sell before the end of the payback term, or they sell within 5 years, then that sale is going to generate an automatic payoff of the gap note on sale, or some other combination that would be factored. But it's in addition to or important but ancillary to the mechanics of how you use the TIF. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at.
I think if a person can qualify as 150,000 for a mortgage and so forth, the bank's going to require them to have some equity into it.
Yeah, they could, right.
Typically,
Yep.
it's not, I would tend to think that's
Or they,
Approach
or that you could require the down payment assistance.
Yeah.
Where I'm getting at is that it's up to you collectively to decide what the Leelanau County Housing Development Program is going to look like. And you can structure it to how you want to craft it to meet the needs that are in your community.
But I think the intent though too would be that, the reason for going through this process is that you want attainable housing. So you want to try to keep it that way. Now, I don't want to say necessarily in perpetuity, but you want to keep it that way, to create generational wealth, help people get, bring themselves up, provide that housing stock and so forth. So you don't want this to be a situation where someone comes in there, gets involved in the program and then flips it in a year, and makes a bunch of money on it.
There's another interesting angle on this, which I haven't brought up until now, and there's some detail to it, but I'll bring it up, which is if you're familiar with community land trusts, okay? Well, one question that might rise, which is because values rise in this county, right? If you help that household go, then you are going to have some potential appreciation. You might want to consider aligning this with a scatter site community land trust, which might say to preserve affordability on these units, which at the point of resale, there's going to be a certain percentage of return that comes back to that owner, the seller, okay? But maybe not like too much, okay, all right? And that a portion that actually goes perhaps to go into a fund which supports this program. I'm not telling you to do that, but what I'm suggesting is that you have options. That's what I'm suggesting. You have because you got the mechanism, ability to get at the attainable housing market now, if you organize to do this, now you can think about what other bells and whistles you want to put in to surround the basic mechanical process that you're hearing and understanding today.
But the neat thing is it's driven by performance.
It's driven by performance, that's right.
It's a subsidy to try to help with that regard, but it's driven by people working, having a job, paying their taxes, so on and so forth.
Right. That addresses, thanks for saying that, Jeff, because it addresses a comment I've heard before on the field too, which is, and I'll say this way, which is this program is actually helping homeowners or helping renters through the production process of builder developers. Note this example, right? The house sells at 190, developers doing the production, okay? The real beneficiary here is the household. And that's a big difference from other incentive programs. Now, there's a benefit to incentive programs, okay? But in some circles, some might think, do developers really need to be incented when they are actually making really, really, really good profits? I'm not gonna get into the specs on that. My point is that this concept is utilizing builder developers doing what they do to provide benefit to households. If you think it through, that's what's happening here.
I would just caution that limiting equity or that kind of stuff, you have to keep in mind the underwriting for that mortgage for that buyer and what financing entities will finance, because it's been an issue in the past that a buyer can't get a mortgage on something that's going to have all these other little agreements on it. So you have to be really careful about how much you restrict, how many parameters you put on these, because your buyers just can't get a mortgage on the regular market to buy one if there's all this stuff on it, because they just don't have it. Well,
Yesterday down in I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, so.
Yesterday down in Manistee, after our presentation there, the community foundation director came to me and said, do you think that we could be the gap financer on these loans or in these projects? I said, you sure could, absolutely. Now, what would that could look like? It could look like that the community foundation takes donations, investments from the community, and actually, instead of it being a loan, essentially sits in as equity. That $40,000, well, it's not there now. That $40,000 doesn't have to be a loan. It could be equity, of which in an agreement, the community foundation basically is when the house sells, there'll be a capture on it, but that capture goes back to the community foundation. But it's not an amortized repayment. It's simply a capture that actually goes back to the community foundation's fund. Okay, so my point is that you have options. You have options here. Please don't, it's not going to be the way Jim Fisher says it in the meeting on Friday, September 17th. It can be however you structure it. Now you can see how the component pieces come together. Yes, sir.
going back again to that hypothetical $40,000
Mhm.
gap loan, is there any legal reason that the land bank, if the land bank is funded, couldn't be the lender?
There's no prohibition,
Okay.
assuming they have the funds, or they're willing to actually to do that. That could be the case. Yep.
Just hypothetically.
The other thing to
Yep.
consider too is that the brownfield authorities, after we do brownfield capture for the eligible costs and so forth, they have the means of capturing another 5 years also
Mhm.
of that tax increment that can go into a local brownfield revolving fund.
Okay.
And that
Or-
can be used as well.
Or you say, that 5 years goes in a revolving fund, but maybe it's a separate fund you set up and it's for the housing trust fund. And admin costs too, by the way. You might say, for these types of housing projects, not telling you to do this, but you might want to say, we're going to capture, and admin costs is actually going to go to help administer the housing development program. You have options. You have options.
Can I comment on this $40,000, just real quick?
Yeah.
Just as an example, in Leelanau County, we have a brownfield plan on the parcels in Leland, where the old government center was. Most of them are vacant right now. There are a few homes that have been built. We owe the developer money, but we're not looking at it as, well, we gotta wait till the house is built here and we'll capture this much and this much and this much. We are capturing the tax off of every single one of those parcels, vacant or the higher priced homes that are being built. And we use that pot of money to then look at what do we owe the developer. So that $40,000 gap, we're not just looking at, well, these are all vacant over here and you can't, you're gonna have to wait. We're looking at the whole pot of money that we're bringing in, and obviously on these new homes, the taxes are higher and we're bringing in more money there to be able to go back to the developer. So if you look at it as the whole development project versus one house at a time, I think it helps with that, how we pay that developer back.
Yes, sir.
Yes, go back to Trudy being a developer again, but the gap is to bring sewer to a community sewer to a project you described, the 30-unit project, which is already zoned, everything's, it's fine. But the gap is the expense of bringing offsite utilities to a project. Can this be used, your process be used for that? Because
To answer your question.
In Leelanau County, we only have like 3 communities that have community sewers. So therefore, you don't see a lot of development because of you can't get the density and the land costs are so high, you can't afford to do that. So by bringing the community sewers to a development like this, I think we see a lot more activity.
You have expertly set up the base for a forthcoming example slide. So I'm going to ask you to hold that for about 3 minutes, okay? But don't let me get away without answering that question, okay? The quick answer is yes, and I'm going to show you an example. Other questions? I love them. Keep these questions coming. Don't consider out that I need to just get there's only 4 slides left here. So we're good. So, you gotta go back. Back. Thank you. This map predates the pandemic. Okay. So today I can't tell you that everybody's still in business, is still in these areas, but back then, back in the fall of 2019, this was the status out there. In other words, the counties or city villages that are yellow, had expressed to us, and we talked, and they were intrigued. They want to understand this more, okay? And those that are in orange were past that and starting to explore this idea. Now, I just found out from Jeff today that I had oh no, I don't have Gladwin County. I thought I had Gladwin. I had Beaverton here because they were considering it, but now you mentioned Gladwin County. I got to add. See, we got to update this map, okay? Because Gladwin County is now going to get involved with this as well. And here's you guys, Leelanau, okay? Because back in 2019, you were exploring how you might want to do this, and ergo, I'm here today to tell you keep exploring, but please consider moving into this stage here, okay, which is where the areas that are in green, where it's going. Now I know there's been some updates to this. City Marquette is active now, a few other ones too. So we got to change this map. But I want you to see out of this is that there was a fairly wide spread across the state of jurisdictions that were considering this, and they probably still will. once they can get their attention back focused on that. And that's internally, we kind of set our goal between now and the end of the year. We're gonna, I'm gonna put a lot of miles in. We're gonna try to revisit all these counties and I'm tired of Zoom. So and now that I can travel, I'm getting in the car and we're gonna head out there and see where these communities go. So yeah, it's this, and it's growing. That's my point. It's not a big practice yet, because these techniques of how you organize and structure just have to be modeled and put into practice. So yes, Yarrow, we're going to give you the examples of the agreements, because I know she's working with Housing North and across the entire region, and this is starting to grow as a concept, as well as other tools and techniques to make it happen. Now you can turn Slack. Okay, 2 examples now. You know where Newaygo is, correct? A little further downstate, down 131 corridor. They came to us because Newaygo County does not have a land bank. They came to us. It actually was the city of Newaygo. They had a developer, John Whiteley, Sable Homes, who's active in West Michigan, in that region. And they had, this is pretty close to the unbuilt plat situation, not exactly pretty close. So he'd been approved, has been approved for, I want to say, a 40 some odd lot development. And it was in phases of this approved plat. Maybe it was a site condo, can't remember. And the issues for them, was twofold. One is the cost of his sell his house. The market wasn't able to get to that point, okay? Second was that his cost of sale was impacted because this location, if you've been to Newaygo, you know Newaygo is not flat. Newaygo is kind of like, it's not even like this, it's kind of like this, right, in town, with the Muskegon River Valley going through and the like, great location, love that community, but it's slightly hilly down there, which means that you have some infrastructure site prep issues often if you're doing projects, because there's not a lot of flat land out. So we responded to the city and we said, yeah, we'll help you. We did exactly what I said. We entered into an agreement where the developer, John Whiteley of Sable Homes, took his phase 2, 16 lots, and it titled them to us, State Land Bank. And we held them. Actually, we're still holding them right now. Went through the brownfield process, got approved. His costs were more traditional Act 381 work, infrastructure and site preparation. Now keep in mind, this is Newaygo. Newaygo's not a core community, so this is a big help to them as well, because land banks can do anything on activity ones. So this plan reimburses infrastructure and site prep costs. But what does that really mean? That means he brought his house prices down because he had, so in essence, it's a translation of subsidy through covering site preparation and infrastructure costs, okay? That plan was approved, and it's underway. He's building out his 16 lot phase 2. And I know sometime between now and the end of the year, we haven't transferred back, but we will back to them to go. So that's a live example of how this can work in a smaller rural outstate community. Next slide.
So the question on that, what kind of, and I know Yarrow kind of asked for this, but what are some of the clauses in a control retention agreement for a developer, like design, placement, all those kind of things? What kind of control do they retain when they feed it over to the land bank that they're developing?
Most of the time, at least our role, is that we're focused on performance to make sure the project gets built. Okay, we might require that they commit to building their attainable affordable unit count that they committed to us. We're not going to get in details on their design or their project because we see our role simply as limited here as a base platform of escrow title holding.
I think we look at the locals from a site plan review perspective and so forth,
yeah.
I think, to control that.
Now, if we were doing the development, which we can, and we have a big inventory, 2,600 properties across the state. If we were to do a project, then we would get into the details on that, okay? And we have considered that. We issued a open request for qualifications 2 months ago to the developer community across the state. It's on our website, michigan.gov/landbank. And there's no time limit. Any developer can submit their credentials. We're looking for any party, residential, commercial, industrial, alternative, or other uses, solar if they want to. And they submit their credentials, and if they meet minimum standards, on our vetting, we'll qualify them, and they're in our stable. And so we're getting ready to do this. We want to wait until maybe after the first of the year, but we're going to start putting out some of our properties to our group of developers. And the reason we did this, twofold. We want to have a relationship, okay? Because does the development industry understand land banks? No, not yet. So that's a way of doing it. And second is we want to know who we're dealing with. Now, the question came up, well, what about developers might have a great project idea for us, but they're not in our qualified list. So that's why it's an open-ended process. We're going to notify, perhaps publicly. We're going to seek qualifications or seek proposals to our qualified list. And if you're a developer that wants, you got 3 weeks to submit your credentials to get vetted, and then you'd be in our group to be distributed to respond to our proposal. Point being is that's one of our mechanisms of identifying who our willing parties will be for our own sites when we get started. But some of our sites we have some of the biggest, baddest brownfields you can imagine. Okay, so solar, stuff like that. And I don't think we're going to have houses over there and some of those properties. Other questions? All right, here's this example. Now we're coming back to your question. Oakland County. You all know where Oakland is, right? They don't have a land bank. So there's 159, it's either 157 or 159. I can't remember the exact acreage, Johnson. So we got a contact in from the treasurer's office, Oakland County Treasurer, back in middle 2019. Because Jill and Andy Meisner had heard about what we were talking about here and said, well, would you be interested to talk with us? Because we have this property and a project developer in Commerce Township, non-core community, that is just really struggling, and they may have an opportunity. So we went and met with them, and here's the nuts and bolts. It was a former gravel quarry, okay? Now, you may have those up here, but this was before modern requirements for restoration and such. I mean, this was mined and digged, and you've got big slag heaps and big, grades are like that, okay? They're bad, they're terrible. It wasn't a contaminated site, okay? So, and surrounding this are residential subdivisions. This is just like a big eyesore in the middle of Commerce Township. And on top of that, it was 3/4 of a mile from the nearest public infrastructure, okay? So this site, without any assistance, would never get developed. It's not just, a developer come in and they can build the homes and that'll pay for the infrastructure. No, the site itself has to be prepped for development. Remember we talked about extraordinary costs? This is like double-decker extraordinary costs here, right? It's not just the site is crappy, but it needs infrastructure support. So we agreed. We said, okay, we'll do this. We want to do it. So we have a pending agreement with the developer. Actually, this is interesting. This is going from the property is owned by a church. So this arrangement is going to go from a church to us to the developer. And parallel to this is a development agreement between the developer and the church, which is we're going to buy the property, but we're going to do it through this way. Okay, so these arrangements sometimes get kind of funny when you look at them. We call them 1-2-1s. From them to us back to them. This is a 1-2-3. This is a 1-2-3 project from them to them to them. 1 to 2 to 3. So 200 homes, 200 plus homes are going to be built on this house, and the infrastructure cost is in 8 digits. I want to say it's like $11 million. This is Oakland County. Okay, so that $11 million plus our 550, which by the way, $2 million and 550, is going to pay off in about 16, 17 years. Because what's the home values in Oakland County? Like $400,000, $500,000, they're pretty high. You know, you have some high values
Leelanau
here.
County is second to Oakland County.
Okay, well then, okay, you guys understand that world. Okay. Right, so this is ready to go, all right? And where it's at right now is with the Brownfield Authority. And it's an education process. Oh, it's interesting because Oakland County Brownfield Authority, Jeff and I have talked about this. They have some of the brownfield experts that were with us from day one. You know, I'm not gonna name names, they're really good people. This concept, unless it takes time for the traditional brownfielders to get their minds wrapped around this, okay? Because the mainline focus of brownfield redevelopment finance, Act 301, originally was we're gonna get at these contaminated sites. There wasn't a recognition that it's really parcel-based TIF for 1, 2, 3, 4 categories of properties. From day one, it was, we gotta get at these sites and get them cleaned up and to go. So education, I've probably been in 5 work sessions with the Oakland County the Oakland County Brownfield Authority. And the questions have been just good, and they've been a lot, because they, you know, in their mind are trying to get their understanding of okay, what's the flow of benefit in this project? How does this help and such? They struggled with the 550, okay? You know, where's the revenue coming? And I heard this question from somebody, well, what's the person in that community or the rep in that county commissioner rep is gonna say when they see this project? And it's not benefiting the county tax base. Well, my response is, well, when this project is done capturing, it's gonna benefit the county tax base. And the rep in that community, the official in that community, sir, from my experience, because I've been in brownfields for a number of years, my response generically to somebody who asked that question would be, well, and when there's a project in your community that looks like this or something like this, and if there was assistance asked from the state land bank, then you would immediately recognize the benefits of what would happen there, okay? So in other words, it's community A recognizing that a project in community B, okay, has indirect benefit generally on time for how that's going to happen, as well as the opportunity in the future to help you in community A. So they're supposed to meet next week. I think that they're going to approve. Pretty confident they're going to approve. And then it's going to go through the process, governing body, and we'll finalize the land bank agreement, and this will go. So the long-winded answer is saying yes, you can do it, because a land bank control ownership affords the opportunity to consider all the activities under Act 381. The question that comes next is, do you have enough value that you can capture to pay for that list of costs that you've got? And that becomes an economic discussion, like we've talked about a few times. If it's housing and you want to have deeper subsidies, my recommendation, look at structure projects as mixed income or even mixed use. You know, I don't know the sites you got, but maybe there's an opportunity to bring in non-residential use. You can capture that if it's new build and use that as well. And that doesn't need subsidy either. So you got options to consider as you go, but that's the beauty of this, which is prior to thinking about this, your affordable, attainable crisis in this county has been, yep, we know there's a problem. Yep, we know there's a problem. Yep, we know there's a problem. My charge to you, this is, I think you can move the slide. I think this is the last slide. I'll come back in a minute. My charge to you is get to the doing. Okay, organize and get to the doing, because the tool's in front of you. You can do it. Yeah.
We don't have this slide example up here, but I'd just like to add kind of very similar parallel to the project in Oakland County that Jim's talking about. But about 4 years ago, I worked with the city of Nagani up in the UP, Upper Peninsula. They had a piece of property that was a mine site and former mine site. And City Street stopped right at the edge of that property. And they wanted to put a senior housing facility on that property. And so we did. We used the land bank, moved the property into the land bank. But we had multiple partners. The electric utility was owned by the city. And so the electric utility paid for running the electricity to the site. The developer paid for the sewer and water and the street extension to the property. And we put it in a land bank. We adopted the brownfield plan. We rolled it out of the land bank. And site's built, occupied, and that was about 4 years ago that we've done that project. And they're paying it off. It's about $1 million eligible costs. We have brownfield costs, like traditional environmental, as well as the infrastructure costs and so forth. And actually the portion, about 7-8 acres that where the senior housing facility has been built, it's occupied and so forth. But the other property now will be developed also and benefits from this infrastructure and so forth that's there too. Other houses have been built around it.
It's a real showpiece. It's a real showpiece. And it demonstrates another asset you have. Because this gentleman here is under contract working with your land bank and brownfield authority. And so my message to you is, as you get to the doing, use them. There's only 2 consultants in the state who understands this. He's one.
Who's the second?
That's okay.
I will. Susan Wensley.
I was gonna say, I
Susan
don't know, I just
Wensley.
wanted you to say it.
Susan Wensley. The consultant
I
community.
did my project before her, though.
Actually, we're working on a project right now with MEDA, the Economic Development Association. You've got reps in that. Steve Schnell is in
Yeah,
that
I was
working
gonna
group.
ask
So,
you to maybe mention that.
yeah, we're working on a manual, a project which, when I say a manual, yeah, it's written, but it's also going to be a training protocol and such about actually how you do this. And we brought together a small but a really good spread of experts, some really good experts. We did talk about getting into the details, man. These guys want to get to the right there, and I keep saying pull them back. We have to think about this from basic standards first, okay? Because we want to be able to get communities into this. So, and Jeff and Susan are the technical consultants to that group, and they're actually developing a template brownfield plan model for housing subsidy. I'll say that again. We're developing, with their help, a template model for housing subsidy so that I don't think maybe you can get to this level. We'll talk, we're working on it, which is you kind of like fill in the blanks, okay? You might have some like open-ended questions, not just easy blanks, and you're pretty well set to go once you know your numbers and you can set up your tables and charts to go. Because that's a brownfield plan, okay, the language, the verbiage in the brownfield plan is kind of standard. Where the guts is in the tables and the numbers, and that's what's supposed to be there. So, here's how we'll help you. We have a program right now for land banks where we will actually loan money for any purpose for land banks to get development projects going. Short-term money. The idea is to actually provide money up front to get them started. We want to get taken out when the project gets approved and ultimately financed, okay? They're short-term loans, and it's simple interest. Here's the underwriting. Apply, be considered, get approved. What's be considered? Are you the land bank? Do you have a good project? We want to go see it? What you want to do, Todd? Okay, fine. That's our underwriting. Right? Really hard. We'll do this work, help a county land bank if they want to have, some kind of land banks like this idea of having, state on their shoulder, working them through. That we're in Van Buren County, that's what's happening right now, okay? This pre-development program, literally Wednesday at our board meeting, our state board adopted its budget for next fiscal year, October 1 fiscal year coming. And as part of that, we're going to actually have an element of a new angle to the housing reform rule. Well, actually, it's pre-development. Because that's one of the areas that's usually unfunded and stops projects from getting out of the gate, which is you got to have money up front to actually start to go from formulation to conceptualization. Got to have money to do that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to actually appropriate more money and make it available to land banks or local units working with their land bank to get seed money to get projects started. So you might have opportunity to use that money, particularly because I like coming up with Leelanau County. It's good at the weather in the country. Yeah.
Do you think ARPA funds through the counties could be used to match some of these dollars?
Yep. Absolutely, 100%. Yep. It comes down to how the willingness to do that. Yep.
I see that the Housing Development Loan Program is available to municipal government land banks and what are other public organizations? Community Land Trust be a public organization?
Yes. If you're in partnership with That's the point. We really want to see these relationships. Are you a CLT?
Yes.
Okay, man, this is this land, I've been in 2 before pandemic, and even since then. This research and practice is starting, it's small, but starting to grow. The opportunity to put CLT and on land bank property and with land bank support is like undiscovered gold country, okay? So game on.
Yeah.
And when you do your first project, if we're helping you, the price you pay is you're drafted to come and talk to other CLTs across the state how to do it, okay? All right? You think I'm joking, I'm dead serious. You can manage the slide. I think this is the last slide, and it's just my contact information, because I don't have business cards. We're just getting back to regular function, and the land bank is permanently remote for the present time. Quick story, the return of state office employees is still at social distance requirements, so we were on the 5th floor at Romney, and who was on the other 5th floor, outside the 5th floor was Lieutenant Governor. And so we got kicked out because he needed the whole 5th floor because social distancing, the cubicles, stuff like that. That actually happened about a year ago in the plans. And so we said, we had the option, okay, so you want to go to another building or do you want to stay remote? So I don't have business cards. That's how you get a hold of me. Or Trudy, Jeff knows how to get a hold of me. What are the questions that you have? I cannot believe I answered all your questions.
Jim, can I just make a plug that we'll dive into this more at the Housing Summit in a month or so?
Yeah.
So if you haven't signed up, we're gonna have a session which will talk about the project I think you mentioned in New Haven. And Emily Dorr will be there as well as the people who did the project, MCC and Ryan Kilpatrick. So, and there's lots of resources out there, but Leelanau County definitely has the tools already in place to do this. So we're in a good place. Not every community has that.
Bravo to that. And after that summit, you're going to commit that we're going to do another presentation. And the reason is because the average time of circulation of information is probably at least 2, maybe 3 times. Because I've brought together a lot of moving pieces across different statutes today, like back in 2019, to talk to you about. And so you've been a great audience. I appreciate your time here. So keep thinking about this. Please take my charge. This is the only thing, my only charge for coming up here today, outside of the beautiful weather and beautiful country, is that you take this information and you get to doing. Because you have the tool structure now to attack this problem. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Have a great day.
Thank you all for attending. Thank you, Jeff and Jem. And please, if you have any ideas, if you have properties that you want to develop or no properties or projects, please get with me. I think the biggest thing we need to do now is start that organization that Jim talked about. We need to start pulling together all these groups and ideas and figuring it out.
Is the slideshow available online?
We taped this.